My bad. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with me today. My name is Professor Kelsey Coes. This is the Divination Academy, and this is my first class in the Working with Demons series. Today, like I said just a little bit ago, it's a super, super basic overview. We're going to first start talking about the framework of demons, like what that verbiage actually is, what it means, who those entities can be. Culture, we're going to look at a lot of different things. And then I'm going to give you an overview of some of the practices that are going to come up when you start working with demons. Throughout this series, we'll talk about a lot of other stuff like protection, like how to know if one's around you, if you can accidentally summon them, and if you can, how. We'll talk about how to work with them. We'll get into the really nitty-gritty of how to do that. But today is a very basic overview. My name is Kelsey Coes. I think everybody in my class today has been here with me. So if you're watching the replay, I am a mystic, a great practitioner. I'm a solo practitioner. I have been practicing for about 15 plus years. I pull from many pantheons, cultures, and practices, and I'm all about duality and balance and energy. So I am not teaching this class from a place of the concept of demons are quote unquote evil. I actually don't like using that word. I actually very much disdain that word. I work from a place of reverence and respect, and that they're entities that we can work with in our practice and in our life. Because just like humans, just like every single species and entity, there are good, there are bad. So that is, and I don't even like using those verbiages either, but that's the best way to use that right now. So that is how we're coming to them, working at them with reverence, understanding, and we're going to break some stigmas about them. So that is what this class, this series is going to be all about for you guys. Before we get going, does anybody need my study guide for today? And does anybody have anything they want to say on this topic in general? Any opinions they want to throw out there? Any questions they want to ask right away? And then if you do ask questions today that I'm going to cover more specifically in later series, this is going to be my answer. So please just don't take it like as an offense or anything. I'm just going to tell you like we're going to cover that in super detail later. But thank you for asking that. So just so you know, because this is super basic. But any questions, comments, opinions, anything like that? Thank you, Jen. Yeah, it's I get in this argument a lot, especially with my husband, because I hate, I don't even like using those terms. I try very hard not to use those words. I prefer using wanted versus unwanted, because everybody's perspective of what's good and evil to them is going to be so different. So I try not to use those words. Okay, I don't see any hands going up or anything else going in the chat. So I think, would you put Kalima? Okay, I personally don't look at demons that way. Like that's not how I view the definition of like a demonic entity. But if people view pagan deities as that, yes, I can understand and they could be put in that category. Because there is that philosophy that pretty much every pagan deity that is not an Abrahamic deity is considered a demon. That is some philosophies, that is some practices views. So yes, I could see them put into that. I personally don't, because I work with them as the standpoint of they are a deity. So I don't work with them in that way. But I totally understand. Thank you, Morgan. I think it's because of the class topic. That might be why too. That might be why too. Something about it, maybe. I'm so happy I could change that, Jen. You have no idea how good that makes me feel, because that's one of my main things is especially as a Grey Witch and practitioner, and so focused on duality, is like I really, really love that. Okay, awesome, Melissa. I'm glad that I could answer that for you. So yes, my opinion is no. My opinion is no. I work with them in the sense of deities. Demonic entities are a whole other ballgame. Goetic spirits are a whole other ballgame. Demonic elementals, whole other ballgame. So yes, that is my personal opinion. Okay, so we'll jump in. So when it comes to working with demons, the term demon is actually derived from a Greek word daemon, which means a supernatural being or spirit. That's it. That's it. I'm going to emphasize this again. That's it. A supernatural entity or being. That's it. There was no connotation on whether there was a good or bad or a malevolent or benevolent. I'll use those verbiages a lot more during this class. I'm actually going to, I break down exactly what definition of malevolent is also, by the way, we'll do that too. But that's it. That's all the definition was. It wasn't anything else to it. Christianity. It's going to be what I'm going to say right now about that before we get into that more. That's where that changed. But that's all that true, the original like term for demon derived from, that's all it was. Even though like now, like I said, it's very commonly associated with evil or malevolent spirits, it really just meant a spiritual being that could influence a person's character. It was literally just a supernatural being or spirit. So for example, there was also the term of an agathos daemon, which is a good spirit. So that's when you would get those verbiages added to that. That's an adjective. That's where you get the connotations. And a lot of times, we see him in a lot of different things, but a super famous one, the Greek philosopher Socrates talked about his. He talked about his daemon often, and that his daemon is a spirit that inspired him to actually seek and speak the truth, to seek the true wisdom, and speak it and spread it to those who needed it. So like again, like this was never originally supposed to have this negative connotation from it, this evil connotation to it. That was never the purpose. That was never what it originally was. And again, this happens with a lot of different words. I have some examples in the study guide because if you think about Lucifer, like it's got this super negative connotation. It literally means light bringer. Satan, negative connotation. Originally in Hebrew means just an adversary. It's just somebody who likes to question you. This is somebody who just like if that's all that Satan was, like that's what I've been my entire life. All I've done is question. That's all I've ever done. My parents, like everybody, like it's all I've ever done is question. So like it's got this negative connotation now though, because we want to question. Devil, originally a Greek word, was actually just an accuser. It was literally just somebody who's accusing you of something. Yes, I can see how that can end up with a negative connotation, but if you actually did what they said you did, they have a right to accuse you of it. So it doesn't automatically have to have this negative connotation to it. So it's something to think about when it comes to the frame of mind of this word of demons, of this word of demonic, of this word of these entities. You really want to try to break free of this definition that it's got this negative feel, this negative stigma, this negative connotation, because it just doesn't. Just like every other species, every other entity across all the dimensions of the multiverse, there are going to be good and there are going to be bad. There are going to be those that want to do positive for others and those who want to do negative for others. And there are also, I wholeheartedly believe, we all encompass both parts of that. So we're going to experience that on both sides at some time in our life. So depending on how you look at it, like we all could also be considered this demonic entity when you think about it. So I really want you to try to break free from this very stigmatized definition of this word, because it's just not what it is. The jinn, they could also be considered demonic entities. If I literally was working on homework for my jinn class with Alex at work, and one of my coworkers who practices Islam, she got very upset that I was working with a demonic entity and I was studying that. And so like if you really like look at it, there's so many different examples of other entities. The Fae, some people would consider the Fae demons. Some people would consider the Fae demonic entities to not work with. Some people would consider, just elementals, also like the Aziza, that like those are considered demonic entities to not work with. But it's just every entity, every species, they're gonna have both sides. It's a spectrum. Every species is a spectrum. So I really want to try to break free from that. So when it comes to the term demonic and demon entity as well, we also have to talk about the fact that this is also tied to psychology and mental health. Because this term isn't just also attached to a spiritual being and a spiritual entity, this term can also be used in psychology and psychoanalytic studies, especially coming out in the 19th and 20th century, because a lot of psychologists and psychoanalysts were also Christian theologians. They needed to start to wrap their head around the fact that like the mental health field psychology was changing. We were reinterpreting the meanings of like our traditional beliefs when it comes to like good versus evil and mental health and things like that, and the concept of angels and demons. plays a role when it comes to Christianity, which then unfortunately kind of flooded into psychology as well. But, you know, this term also got brought into that when it came to the parts of yourself that are the shadow, the things that you are unwanted, your super ego, you know, things like that. Your demons are ending, they're usually tied to things that have to do with, you know, psychic content, your primitive instincts of your body, your sexuality, aggression, you know, if emotions are completely stable. So this verbiage and this term also plays a role in that field as well. And again, I want to shatter that. I want to break that free. They're not demons that we need to like slay and get rid of. Like, yes, addiction it's something that you deal with, but is a demon that you need to like exorcise or remove from you? No, it's a shadow part of yourself that needs your attention to work through and to work through in order to become your whole self and fulfill your sacred contracts and purposes. So I also wanted to touch on the fact that like that term also gets brought into that sense and in that and in that way, shape, or form as well. So there's another way that that's looked at. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna jump into the chat here, see if you guys have any questions here first. Okay, 2 new messages. Okay, honey, that's a whole other thing that you just opened up a whole other can of worms for me with your with your thing in the chat. So yes, Satan and the devil are used synonymously. They shouldn't be. Satan, devil, Lucifer, they're actually separate entities and beings that actually have to do with separate practices. And I'm going to be breaking that down in a class too when we start that series on all the different paths. But yes, they are used synonymously, and it does make sense because of like all of that and the other side of the opinion. Like I told that makes sense. But you just yeah, they're different entities. In your opinion, is the payment higher in terms of exchange when working with demons? By higher payment, I mean the amount of offerings and gifts, also punishment. Then deities? Yes. I knew you knew that, honey. You just touched a nerve for me. I knew that you knew that. Yeah, it's a rant I go on with a lot of people. It has nothing about you. Melissa, but yes. Okay, so with deities, yes, I do think that way. The reason why, and I'm going to touch on it later, is when it comes to working with demons, like it's very ritualistic, it's very ceremonial, and it's very specific. It's very, very specific when it comes to working with them. This is why a lot of times when I introduce myself, I always say like I'm a very ritualistic and ceremonial practitioner because I work with them and because of their magic and because of that, like, and it's very crucial to my practice. It's pulled into it. This is very ritualistic and ceremonial work with them. So that's why I feel that way. I also feel energetically, because of like what's entailed with the rituals and the summonings and how the ceremonies work. I feel like I end up paying a more energy, like a higher energetic price. I'm usually a lot more tired. But on the hierarchy of things, I don't think they're the highest exchange level. Personally, I think archangels, they are, they require a very, very high payment. And honestly, I would rather work with a demonic entity, a Goetic spirit, than an archangel any day. They have a very, very high price, and their punishments can be very, very swift and very brutal. But like, yes, compared to deities, yes, that would be my answer. You two always have good questions and comments. I love it. Okay, so I see Hannah. Honey, go ahead. I don't know if that means you're gonna type or if you're gonna be able to unmute yourself, but I will just wait and see what happens. Whatever you can do, because I know you said you're in the car. You're fine. You're totally fine. And it is really hot in my office today. I don't know why. I guess it's been unusually warm in Minnesota this year.
What's the temp in Minnesota right now?
I think right now it's like 42.
Oh, it's the same in here in Connecticut.
Yeah, that's
Crazy.
warm for us. For us to not be like below zero right now is just weird.
Oh,
And we have no snow on the ground, which is just weird. After you introduce yourself and make a connection, can you lose some ceremonial stuff? But that's depending on which way you're choosing to work with them, and depending on what type of entity they classify as. If they're an element, a demon, like an elemental, yes, possibly. Yes, but if you're working with Goetic Spirits, I say no. That may differ from practitioner to practitioner, but I say no because with the Goetic Spirits, like it is very, very it's very specific and very ritualistic. Um and it's very rigid in making sure not only like it's also for your protection, like it's also for your protection to make sure that you're staying within that. And but again, like you also get to create that contract. So you get to create how specific it is. So it is it possible to do that? Yes. I just personally have never ventured away from that. But I just can't personally speak on that. Does that help answer at all?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Probably not the answer you wanted, but okay, Lindsay, go ahead.
Hi. So kind of just wanted to say thank you. I spent decades growing up in Christianity, and I had very unpopular beliefs about who and what Satan and demons were. So it's just very refreshing to find someone who is actually digging back into what they actually are. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Can you ask for your rights? Can this happen with deities or both in your practice? By asking for, can you define what you mean by asking for rights, Melissa, for me? Because
the
I have
way
that, I just don't want to assume it.
the way I was thinking it would be asking for your gifts, asking for, kind of like your acceptance into this world, if you would. I don't know, without having the right verbiage, I would just say that, like asking for your rights, like give me without demanding it, like, you know,
Yes, so
maybe
I get what you're saying. To me that sounds like a connection through a dedication. Does that kind of is that kind of or am I not on the same wavelengths?
go with what you were assuming earlier.
So to me, it sounds like a dedication, right? Is kind of what you're talking about. So if you go through the process of getting to the point to where like you have that deep connection, you have that deep, um, I can't think of another word than connection. For some reason, I want another word, but I just can't. Um, you have that deep connection with that entity. So you asked about deities too, even though we're talking about demonic entities. You asked about the deities too. So for example, like with Persephone, personally with me, my connection with her got very, very intense. It got very, very personal. It got to the point to where like she was coming around and I was feeling her on a very regular basis, even without me having to consciously do that. She became very part of my energy and my energetic field because of the connection that we had to each other. So then I made the choice to go through and do a dedication rites with her, which is a dedication ceremony to where like you're energetically linking and tying yourself to that deity, um, in a almost in a way of service. I don't like that term. I don't like that verbiage that much, but that's the best way that I can say that. And then that way, like your flow is, I don't want to say unlimited, but it almost is in that in sense of the way because the connection is it's always there. It's always there. Like I'm pretty sure you were there with Persephone. If you weren't, or if you watched that class, like the energy that you feel between me and her, it's very, very potent when I call her, but it's always there with me all the time. And I get almost like the blessings from her duality. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much.
Okay. Okay, good. I hope. It's really, really hard to explain. So I really hope.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's jump back in. So I want to talk about the term malevolent, just because this term pops up a lot, especially when talking about these beings and these entities and, this species. So typically malevolent beings, it can be a lot of things. It can be classified as demons, fallen angels, ghosts, goblins, evil spirits, hybrid creatures, the devas in Zoroastrianism, which is actually what's considered, the devas are actually considered like the the good deities when it comes to Hinduism. So like they actually flip them. It's really interesting. The Narkas, which are the creatures of hell from Jainism. You have the Oni, which are the attendants of the gods of the underworld in Shintoism and other Japanese religions. And there's so many different beings. They would all be classified underneath malevolent. The Fae would be classified underneath there at times. The Jinn would be classified underneath there at times. So like there is some that will say all pagan deities would be classified underneath malevolent, depending on which practice and who you go to. The definition of malevolent means hindering humans in achieving a proper relationship with God, the spiritual realm, or human life situations. So that's typically what they're referring to in almost all contexts when they're talking about it. That's why that definition is so broad. Also why I don't like using that term very much, because humans should be classified underneath there as well, in my opinion. But because of the definition, it hinders humans specifically. That's why we get a pass on that. Some angels are considered to have fallen from grace, and they're considered to be fallen angels. They're classified underneath that. That's an example of malevolent beings as well in some, so we can take a peek at that. Besides tempting humans to like sin and to not have a good relationship with God and the spiritual realm and our situations that are going on, typically malevolent beings are almost always believed to cause pretty much every single calamity we experience. Whether it's natural or accidental or anything like that, they're almost always blamed for, famine and disease and war and earthquakes and tsunamis and, accidental deaths and slip and falls, or, mental health disorders and emotional disorders. This is actually where that phrase comes from, that people with mental health illnesses and diseases can be considered demon possessed. I really, 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 really dislike that verbiage, and I'm really glad we don't use it anymore. But this affects all of that. So that malevolent being, that's what they're classifying. That's usually a typical definition that you're going to see. So now when we look at demons throughout culture, throughout history, they pop up all over the place. In archaeology, they popped up over tablets. They're on temples. They're all over the place. They're in sacred texts. They're supernatural creatures that can be found in many of the world's myths and legends. They're typically considered primordial beings that can be traced back to the beginning of recorded history. We have them as far back as 3500 BCE, but it's very likely that they existed prior. They've always existed. They were there in the Stone Age when our ancestors were there. They've been there throughout, the multiple times the Earth's been reset. They've been a part of this. So some of some of the names and the kinds that you'll find throughout ancient history where we see them pop up in text. And a big reason why I'm talking about this too is because we have the people out there that try to just sit here and deny that these entities exist, that it's just not a thing. And I just don't know how you can do that. They're scattered throughout history. Even I'm going to talk about a little bit later, the Catholic Church fully talks about the fact that they are real. They still do exorcism rites. It's still a thing. I mean, we have the entire practice of Christian demonology even. So it's to deny that these entities are a part of the multiverse, a part of our existence, is just, it's ridiculous and ludicrous to me. I'm just going to be blunt and say it. So that's also a big reason why I'm talking about this, because it's been in human history throughout all of human history. So we have the Galoo. So they're in 3500 BCE. They were the demons that inhabited the Sumerian underworld. Their role and how they were talked about was that they were supposed to haul unfortunate victims off into the abyss, where they were brought to judgment by the goddess of death, Yggdrasil. I always have a hard time saying his name. So that's where they pop up there. Then we have in 1700 BCE, the Asuras. They were superhuman beings from the Hindu scripts who were in constant fight and battle with the Devas, which are considered to be the race of the benevolent gods, when benevolent means the ones that are there to help create that connection between humans and the supernatural, the spiritual realm and the divine. So, and then Hindu culture and Hindu scripts and Hindu religion, the Devas were considered their benevolent gods. And they are described as, actually, in the Hindu scripts, the Asuras were described as having both good and bad qualities. There was the worst one, which was Rakshasa, and he was a bestial appearance and he liked the taste of human flesh. They are also said to be capable of flying, turning invisible, and it could assume the form of any creatures. They are known to be shapeshifters. So I also believe that they kind of ended up with a little bit more of a negative connotation later, more modern times, because of that shape-shifting aspect. We really don't like that aspect, it seems, as humans, and also shape-shifting typically ties to tricksters and trickster spirits. And you know, they're their whole their ball game. So then in 1100 BCE, we have Zoroastrianism, which was adapted from the same root of Hinduism. But what ended up happening is they actually flipped the roles of what we considered the demons and the gods. So the malevolent and the benevolent, like I talked about before. So they made it to where Ahura came to be known as the supreme god, and the Devas came to be known as the false gods. And the Devas were considered to be incredibly obnoxious creatures who resided in the netherworld. They promoted chaos and evil. And they collectively wanted to inflict pain and suffering on the world. And then they were going to do that through murder and earthquakes, through big apocalyptic earthquakes. We then had the Shirin in the 950 BCE. They were considered demonic spirits from Jewish folklore who had a similar function as the Devas did in Hinduism. They were regarded as false gods, and they descended from the serpents of Eden. So the legend says that gods intended for them to actually be human, but he was not able to finish that creation. So then they remained on earth as bestial creatures with only their baser drives towards greed, murder, and fornication, and all other primitive aspects. We then also have in 250 BCE the Lords of Exalba. I'm probably saying that wrong, so if you know how to pronounce that right, please correct me. Remember, most of my studies through reading, so I try my best to pronounce these. They ruled over the Mayan underworld, which was also known as the place of fright. It is described as a court below the surface of the earth associated with death and judgments. And it is also said that the lords would often entertain themselves by sending people into a pit full of tests and traps to either kill themselves or humiliate themselves. And occasionally they were said to actually head into the world of the living, where they would spread misery and disease upon the local people around them. And then we need to talk about the concept of in Christianity, once Christianization started to happen, and especially once the Roman Catholic Church started to take off, deities of other pagan religions were most often and almost always interpreted as demons. Most of them, their pictures and their descriptions of who they were written about got changed. If you've been to a lot of my dark goddess classes, it is incredibly common, and I point this out in almost every single one of the class, the Christian church changed their appearance of a goddess to be winged and horned and to just be this very demonic looking entity. And they talk about them wanting to eat children or sacrifice children and do all these, torturous things, and that they are there to torment people during their life and all these other things. And that the pagan religions and the pagan deities that they are meant to, they are literally, demons. They are the devils. They are the false gods. They also believed in Christianity, and that belief came around that there were also other concepts of demons, like elemental demons that had the ability to possess. Also the Goetic Spirits, they believed they had the ability to possess humans, and that they would torture and torment people during their life through possessions, and that they would convince them to be able to commit crimes and abandon the faith and commit heresy and all these other things. So that's when Christianity came around, that's what the definition of demons was. That's what it changed to. We also then have in 550 CE the Oni. I personally don't work with them in the form of demonic entities, but I totally understand how they can be. I just want to point that here. I am going to teach them as if they are, but I personally, I work with them as a kami. Just so you know, I don't work with them in the sense of like a demonic entity. But the Oni are humanoid creatures with razor-sharp claws, wild hair, and 2 long horns growing from their heads. They possess unnatural features such as an odd number of eyes, extra fingers and toes, or red and blue skin. Originally, these beings were experienced as an invisible force. They would cause tsunamis, drought, and disease. But however, once, the old ways of the kami and Shintoism kind of started to blend and the advent of Buddhism, because those two practices, they really go hand in hand. They became to take on like a lot more of like a physical appearance and more of like that monstrous demeanor to where they look more kind of like an ogre. So if you watch anime, I'm going to throw this out here, even though like the best thing that I can think of you for the picture is like typically the Oni are the ones that, have the 1 or 2 horns in the middle of their head. They look more like ogres. They look a lot more humanoid. And it's said that they like the taste of human flesh. And typically also like they're said to have some type of magical abilities usually as well. It all differs. There's different stories of them throughout, like the Fox and the Jewel and a couple of their Shinto texts. Okay, so then in 550 CE, we also have, bear with me on this one, the Yagui, which were the lesser life forms who populated the Chinese-held Dayu, such as spiders, trees, and skeletons. They were obsessed with power and wished to achieve immortality by serving the gods. They would actually steal elixirs from us humans and magicians, and they would devour our flesh. Legends say that they were once celestial beings who fell from grace and acquired magical power through the practice of Taoism, which is super amazing practice, by the way. Their one most desire is to actually restore their godhood so that they can rule over the cosmos. I find these guys super interesting because they're very similar to the Anunnaki. Just gonna throw that out there. I like this they're super, 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 super. I find them very interesting. If there's one that I say to look into, I would say them. Just throwing that part out there. So in then 600 CE, we had the Fomorians. They're considered hostile, monstrous beings from Irish mythology who came from the sea or the underground. They are portrayed as giants and sea raiders. They are considered to have very harmful and destructive powers. A lot of times they're seen as destroyers. They bring darkness and death and blight and a lot of drought. They're usually blamed for drought and a bad harvest. This race is often depicted as an ugly and demonic with the head of a goat or a horse. Some also had 1 eye, 1 arm, or 1 leg. And it actually is also said that they were part of exacting the taxes from the Irish settlers. And they were thought that if you didn't pay your taxes, they would come and cut off your nose for not paying your taxes. We also then have in 620 CE, the Shahatin, and they're the devils of the Islamic scripture. They're said to be descendants of the fallen angels. They were exceptionally ugly creatures capable of assuming human form. And though their feet almost always remained as hoofs, they eat excrement and they use disease as their main weapon. They are said to exist on the borderline between light and darkness, and they are said to often whisper evil suggestions into men's ears. We also then have the Tichamichel, which in 1200 CE are the skeletal-like demons who live in the darkness. Their ultimate goal is actually to wait until both humans and gods can no longer maintain order in the cosmos. Once order can no longer be maintained between us, they're going to attack and be able to destroy the divine and humankind at the same time. They're also said to be associated with the stars and then would attack the sun during a solar eclipse. And then we have the fire giants from Norse mythology. They are said to be the destroyer of the 9 worlds at Ragnarok. If you want to learn more about that, I'm gonna break that down a lot more when I do the Pantheon classes on those as well. So what I've noticed too as well between almost all of these characters, they have a lot of common characteristics that end up uniting all of them. Most of them are she said, to inhabit an underworld of some kind. Most of them are said to possess some type of cruel disposition, and then most of the times their stories they're in stories that talk about, the benevolent gods and the benevolent deities and the benevolent cosmos and like all of that bringing order, and they're usually framed as like evil. So I just kind of wanted to say that's typically the characteristics. I don't agree with that. I think every single species has different like both sides. Okay, I'm gonna jump into the chat here quick, see if you guys have any questions on those. That is kind of that's demons viewed ancient wise. I am now gonna dive into some of the common views I've come across today. And then we're gonna get into the overviews about the types of magic that we can use to work with them. So we're getting to that stuff, I promise. So I'm gonna jump in, see if you guys have any questions. Okay. I'm upset. Mesopotamia and Sumer, yes. You're gonna like my class on Tiamat, I bet, Melissa. Yes, I Sumeria, Babylon, Mesopotamia, like all of that. I'm actually getting really, 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 really fascinated in like it's so hard because we don't actually have like much text of it at all, so it's really, really inference, but I'm really digging deep into the Atlantean gods right now. And what we theorize theirs are. So like, yeah, I love that stuff. The older, farther back I can get, the more happy. I'm way more happy. Are the Goetic, Solomon, and Christian demons all different pantheons, for lack of a better way? Okay, so yes, I'm gonna say yes, honey. The reason why I'm saying yes is because you can't talk about demonic entities without talking about Christian demonology. And Christian demonology puts the Goetic spirits into different hierarchies. It's a different type of view on them. It's a different way to work with them. Christian demonology really is, it's really coercive. That's going to be the best word that I can say with that. Whereas when you're looking at the Lesser Key of Solomon, which is actually in the Ars Goeta, sometimes I say that word wrong. You might need to correct me a few times. Which is what most people, when you're talking about Lesser Key of Solomon, that's the book that it is in the Goetic text. Because there's actually 5 books in that text. When you're looking at the Lesser Keys of Solomon's and the Goetic Spirits, yes, it's very different how you work with them. It's incredibly different how you work with them. Some people will argue that they're the same entities that they're working with. I don't agree. I don't agree. They put them in very, very different hierarchies. They put them in a very different frame of mind. But again, there's different perspectives. Your knowledge. No, thank you, Melissa. Oh, honey. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. The reason why I say yes, I'm gonna stick with yes. I'm gonna stick with yes, and I'm also gonna say I'm gonna expand on this more as I go through between the two in class. I'm gonna expand on this more because yes, because Goetic Magick it's been around for a while, but the grimoire that we use it from, most people know the version that has Aleister Crowley's his notes, his invocations, his notations on it added to it, but it actually was an anonymous grimoire. We actually don't even know like where it came from. We don't really even like know how long it's been around. So like that's why it's really hard to answer that question a little bit because we don't. But the practice, yes. I'm gonna get okay. We're gonna dig in that more. I'm gonna say that, honey. We're gonna dig in that more. Okay. Any other questions before we jump into more? I don't realize how long I'm talking sometimes. I can't believe we're already 45 minutes in.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
My goal in life is to get you to chuckle at one of my questions like you do for Honey. That's my goal.
It's like, okay. Okay. I don't know how to respond to that comment, to be honest, but I like it, I think.
It's just me being a fool. That's all. I'm funny.
Sounds good. I also, just so you know, I have been known to be told that things go way over my head sometimes when it comes to humor. So if something doesn't land, I promise it's probably not you. Just so you know. My husband tells me I'm not funny all the time. I disagree, but apparently a lot of it goes way over my head. So just, I promise you, like, it's not you. Okay, so some common views on demons today. I want to also reiterate, because of Western civilization's influence on the world, because I also am in the Western part of the world, a lot of these I feel like are steeped in Christian indoctrination, and a lot of these I feel like come from people trying to find the answers because of the Bible. So I just want to put that out there. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit kind of like how I view these entities as well, and how they're all kind of different, but these are common views that are coming up today. The demonic entities, including the Goetic spirits. So, like, again, this includes a lot. Like I'm talking about, this can include a lot of things depending on who you're talking to. This can be things that are considered like actual, like the demon devils from the Bible. This could be considered, the Goetic spirits that you're working with the lesser keys of Solomon. Some, like I said, some people consider this the pagan deity. So really, it's going to depend on your personal definition. So keep that in mind. But some people consider them disembodied spirits of a Adamic race. What that means is the race that existed before Adam. So there's actually an incredibly popular theory that the demons are actually spirits of a race that existed before Adam, before the Adam and Eve story, before Adam considering being the first man, and that these spirit beings are actually, they're separate from the fallen angels. So they're not the fallen angels themselves, they're separate. And it is that they argue that these demons existed in a completely different place, a completely different time, and then they're now disembodied spirits here looking for bodies to be able to possess so they can experience our existence here, because this is the realm that they're in now. This is the plane of existence that they're on now. So that is one theory that I keep hearing people talk about, and this is how some people view demons. And we're talking about this because, again, you're going to have to develop how you feel and what you think demonic entities are. And if you're going to work with them, you're bound to have conversations with other people about them. So it's good to know what other people's views of them are. 2, spirits of the evil dead. So some feel that demons are simply just disembodied spirits of those who have committed evil acts or have an unbalanced karmic debt, and that they're just wandering around the realm, seeking bodies to inhabit, because A, they either miss their body and they want to be able to experience a corporal experience, or B, they just want to, create some mischief and some havoc, and, they want to do some damage. So that's another philosophy and theory that people are talking about nowadays and how they view them. Another one is that they're offsprings of angels and earthly women, aka the Nephilim. If you don't know about the Nephilim, you don't know what they are, that's a new word for you. I definitely recommend looking into that. That's a whole other ballgame. Some people consider the Nephilim watchers, other people don't, and that's a whole other ballgame too. But there's this view that holds the fact that all demons are actually the Nephilim, and who the Nephilim are is that there were a group of archangels that were put on Earth to be the watchers for Earth. They were meant to watch over humankind. They were meant to make sure that we were living within the confines that God wanted us to be living within, and living our godly path. And they took fancy to some human women, and these archangels actually decided to mate with human women, and as a result they ended up having children, and those children were giants, and they were the Nephilim. They were half angels, half human. But a lot of people consider that are classifying all demons as the Nephilim. That's who the Nephilim are. The reason being is because up until this point in the Bible, people are claiming, and I can see it. I can see it in the text, and it backs it up a little bit. That actually in the Bible, the demons actually didn't exist before that point. They weren't talked about until the story of the Nephilim, until the story of the angels and the watchers and all that going down in the Bible. Demons actually weren't brought up. They weren't talked about. They weren't an entity. They weren't a thing. So it actually kind of makes sense with that one, but that is a common one that's going around. Another one is that demons are all of them, every single one of them are fallen angels. They just aren't bound. So they're fallen angels and aren't confined to hell. They're not bound to hell. They're not meant to stay there, and they are actually just fallen angels that are running around doing the bidding of Satan or Lucifer or the devil, depending on which, version of hell you're looking at and which, branch of Christianity you're looking at and which also other, religions you're looking at, that term and that name and which being and entity you're looking at. So those are some views on that. When it comes to my personal view, I believe it's all possible. I believe, for one, that there are some demons that are just simply elemental beings, that are just to cause havoc. There are those that they just want to cause damage, and those are the ones that you could actually possibly accidentally, summon and have be a part of your life. I also wholeheartedly believe in the Goetic spirits and the fact that the Goetic spirits are their own entities, that on their own, and that, they can be worked with in amazing ways, that they are their own entities, just like the archangels are. I don't wholeheartedly believe that all demons are fallen angels, but I do believe some demons can be fallen angels. I do believe some demonic entities can be considered fallen angels. Do I believe that some demonic entities can be spirits of the dead? Yes, I believe that is wholeheartedly possible. I just don't believe that there's one answer to what all demonic entities are. That is how I view it. I view that there are a lot of different possibilities, so it's depending on how you want to work with them. So that is a huge reason also why I'm called this the Working with Demons series, because we're going to go over a lot of different ways because of the different definitions, and how to view them and how to look at them. Okay, so I'm going to jump in the chat really quick before we go to the next one. I think you're funny. Thank you, honey. I think I'm funny too. My husband says people just laugh at me. They're not laughing because I'm funny. But, I'll take it, I guess. The laugh's laugh. Okay, any questions at all after talking about that? If anybody has any comments or any opinions they want to say, you can too. That's totally fine. That's what this is here for. Otherwise, we can go on to the next chunk, where I'm going to start overviewing the different types of magics and the different types of way to work with them. And some other terms you might run into. I think I'm doing okay on time too. Because this study guide, as usual, ended up longer than I anticipated. Okay, so I want to touch on the definition of ceremonial magic, because when it comes to working with Goetic magic and working with the Goetic spirits, it is very ceremonial. So the ceremonial magician typically usually consists of, they consult a grimoire, which actually gives you the names and the abilities of the demons. It gives you all the detailed instructions for you to be able to conjure and control them and summon them and bind them. And some grimoires actually are not limited to just demons. You'll actually have invocations of deities, which is a completely different process. But ceremonial magic is a very specific set of orders and steps that need to happen in order for that magic to be released and to work. It can be very rigid. And I'm saying that word out of deep love and reverence for ceremonial magic, because it is very detailed. It is very order-based. And if you've been in all of you been in my classes, I have OCD. I love order. Like, order is my jam. Order is my jam. So, like, ceremonial, it is very detailed. So what we're going to get into now, Goetia, is one of several words from ancient Greek, which actually came to signify magic, sorcery, and witchcraft as a whole. So originally, that was actually the original definition of that word. In antiquity, it actually, that's how it was referred to. The Romans started to kind of adopt it and change it a little bit. The Europeans started to change it a little bit. But then by the Renaissance time, the word Goetia started to be used as parts of classification for different types of magic. So not until the Renaissance period did it start to get this connotation that we're kind of starting to see now. So they started to use it to classify different types of it. And when it came to that, the types that were considered were, there was natural magic, there was mathematical magic, enchanting magic, and then he subdivided it even further between that to where it was subdivided into ceremonial magic. Ceremonial magic was then subdivided again into two different sections, which is the Goetia magic and the Thurgatia magic. Goetic and Goetic is the working with demons, demonic entities, things like that. Goetic Magick is working with more of the divine, good spirits, or the benevolent, as they would say. So that's like the angels, that's the archangels, that's where Enochian magic would be considered underneath that. So it's also kind of why you see those two hand in hand, because they're both considered ceremonial magic, and then that's where it got divided even further. You could understand why they wanted the division. I think it's pretty self-explanatory where that division came from, especially with the Renaissance, the time period, the culture, Roman Catholic Church, Christianity, all of that was going on. There are some, at that point in time, Goetic rituals that would also be considered to involve angelic beings. There were some at that time that were still considered that, but the main line of work, the major line of work, the main difference is that it is meant to evoke, what they would consider wicked spirits and demons. It was meant to bind them. It was meant to use them as a possible magical weapon or threats of damnation. That's where that word came from. I don't like that. This comes from the demonologist. This comes from the demonologist Johann Weyer, and this comes from that. Agrippa changes that later. By the way, Agrippa starts to bring in the fact that there actually are benevolent demonic entities. And I'm going to actually talk about Agrippa a little bit later too. So once these distinctions started to get made, then all of a sudden you have these all kind of being clumped into this more negative connotation. And then we also have this example of it's really considered the first book. And it comes around in the 17th century. It's the Grimoire of Megaton, and it's also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon. Again, there's a lot of debate on the 17th century. That's become the common answer. There's a lot of debate on really how old it is, to be honest, because it's considered to have an anonymous author. So we don't really know. But then some people actually claim that it does have an author. So again, this is a point of contention when it comes to archaeology and anthropology and history and things like that. But we're gonna go with 17th century, Lesser Key of Solomon. There's also the other 5 books we're gonna talk about a little bit more later. Actually, no, apparently we're talking about it now. Because we're talking about that now. And then I also kind of wanted to talk about the fact too that there are popes that acknowledge this. They acknowledge the Lesser Key of Solomon. They acknowledge that it's a thing. They've looked at it. They've studied it. It's a thing. Okay, so the Lesser Key of Solomon. So we've talked about the definition of Goetia, what the definition of Goetia is, how the definition of the term has changed, and how it's described with Goetic Magick. Now the Lesser Key of Solomon, which is what most people know. When you think Goetic Magick, even if you don't even know the term Goetic Magick, if you hear the Lesser Key of Solomon, most people know what this is, especially in the pagan community. They've heard this verbiage, they've heard this term, they know what it is. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a grimoire or text of magical incantations and spells that is claimed to have been written by King Solomon himself. Again, this is the point of contention. Some people claim that it's completely anonymous. Most people come to the exception that it is written by King Solomon. And he's considered a legendary figure in Jewish, Islamic, and Christian traditions. The text is divided into 5 books. The second book, which is actually the most commonly known one, is the Ars Goetia, which is the most famous one, and that's a description of the 72 demons of 90 of Lucifer's Royal Legion. And I put that in there because most people think that there's only 72 demons, but if you actually look at a couple other practices, there's 90 in Lucifer's Royal Legion. If you look at Lucifer when it comes to that. When you're looking at the Keys of Solomon, though, there's 72. The 5 books are the Ars Goetia, which is known as the Book of Evil Spirits, also called the Goetia. This book contains the 72 demons of the Lesser Keys of Solomon. We also have the Ars Rega Goetia, which is known as the Book of Spirits, and the spirits referenced in this book were considered partly good and partly evil. So that's kind of where you get that duality. We have the Ars Paulina, which is a book governing the planetary houses. We also have the Ars Elemundel, also known as Elemundel of Solomon. This contains the 20 chief spirits said to govern the 4 altitudes. And then we have the Ars Notoria, which is a our treatise on magic centered on orations said to have mystical properties which can impart commune with God. So that one is kind of like, I don't want to say divination. That doesn't feel right. Oracle kind of almost when it comes to that one. That's the best way to kind of describe that one. I personally have only read that book, that part once. I've only read that one once. So I'm actually going to be rereading that one soon. But it's kind of more oracle kind of based with that one. So according to the text, the 72 demons were summoned by King Solomon and bound to his will so that he could use their powers for various purposes. Each demonic spirit is associated with a specific sigil, symbol, or seal representing a demon's name and power. The sigils are said to be powerful tools for summoning and commanding the demons. And I preface this, some people, I don't normally do this. If you guys have been to quite a few of my classes, most of you have. I don't normally do this, but I feel like this is one that you need to be an experienced practitioner before you do this practice. This is not something that you willy-nilly go into. This is something to where like you need to make sure like you know the basics of grounding, like you need to know the basics of ceremonial magic, you know the basics of energy work. You need to know and you need to come into this with reverence and respect and understanding of sigils and these entities, and you need to have done the research on them. This is one where I am very much like I don't want to, like, I'm not going to sit here and put like a time frame or time limit or say you need to be, working for so many amount of years or go through some type of like initiation rites or, be in a coven or a house or anything for a certain amount of time. But you do need to make sure that you have experiences. This should not be your first venture. I am going to say that. I don't feel like this should be your first venture. Again, some people may disagree with me. That's totally fine. Everybody has their own path. But personally, that's how I feel about this one. That's how I feel about this. So just make sure again, it's because if I personally don't feel it's a Goetic Spirits that you can accidentally summon one. I feel like you can accidentally summon the wrong one if you don't have the correct knowledge, if you aren't doing it at the right time, if you aren't following the ritual, if you aren't following everything the way you're supposed to, you don't have the proper items, things like that, you're using the wrong sigil. Yes, but with the Goetic Spirits, when it comes to, I don't think it's something that you can accidentally do because it's very, very intentional. It's like, that's why I feel like the experience it's really, really important with that. Because you can definitely summon the wrong one for sure. And depending on how restrictive you make that contract, if you try to make a contract incredibly restrictive, that can backfire. And that can have some unpredictable and possibly, harmful consequences. Some of the most well-known demons in the Ars Goetia include Baal, who is said to be able to make people invisible and give wisdom. You have Panam, who can provide people with knowledge in arts of the sciences. You have Asmodeus, who is said to be able to teach people how to control and manipulate others. A lot of these actually have pretty, like I said, big, fearsome reputations. But you can use them to be able to tap into your inner power and your inner creativity as well. Because even when it comes to Goetic Spirits, there are different views on who they are and how to work with them. Some people view the Goetic Spirits as entities all in their own, and others view the Goetic Spirits as more of the archetypes, like I've talked about in my archetype class, and they use them as a way to enter that archetype energy. So there are different ways to work with them, and there's also the other view that each and every one of these Goetic Spirits are actually just pagan deities given different names, and you're tapping into that energy as well. So it really depends on like how you're going to view them and how you're going to work with them. So keep that in mind as well when it comes to these 72 demons and with the lesser keys of Solomon. I mean, if you think about who Solomon was, all of those views are totally possible and they make a lot of sense, especially even coming from the pagan deity standpoint. Again, that's not my personal practice, but I 1000% understand that, and it totally makes sense to me. Again, that's just not my personal belief, but you have all these different views that you can personally meditate and do the shadow work to figure out how you want to view them to work with them. it is super, 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 super essential that no matter how you choose to view them, whether it's just as a powerful symbol, whether it's actually as literal beings, whether it's actually as a deity or the archetype, just remember that you need to be respectful and you need to have reverence. You need to have reverence and respect and understanding. I'm gonna hit that home all the time, repeatedly, and I do it in all my other classes. Like it's so, so, so important. So where we're at next in the study guide, I'm not going to go through all of them because I just feel like that's a lot. There's 72 demons and it's a lot. But they actually are, I had them all. I gave you a great brief description of each 72 one. By the way, that took me 4 hours to type out alone. Just the demons, just all the 72 demons alone. But so I have them organized in the hierarchical structure that they're in, their rank, their number, and so you'll see all of that in there, and then well, who they are, what they are said to be able to help with. So the highest level within the hierarchy is king, and then it's followed by the princes, the marquises, the earls, the knights, and the presidents. Just so you know, that's how the hierarchy is listed. That's how they are. So some examples, like I said, you'll see King Bael, you'll see President Marbas, you'll see Marquis Aman. Oh, Aman's King Paimon, he's really fun. You also have Duke Ilegos, you have Duke Basan, you have King Person. Let's see. Well, there's just so many guys. Honestly, you really just got to. King Asmodeus. He's very common for people to work with, and it makes a lot of sense. Prince Stolas, he teaches astronomy and herbs and plants and precious stones and crystals. And if you like crows and ravens and owls, Stolas is super, super interesting. It's actually becoming a lot more common too. You have Marquise Phoenix, super, super, super interesting as well. So if you actually look through a lot of these, most of these Goetic spirits and most of these Goetic entities, they can help you with a lot of like it is amazing the things that they can help you with. Like some of them are just specifically for building a home. They can help you with, poetry, sciences, your magic, building fortresses and high towers. They can help you with, protection. If you like weapons and ammunition, you like to deal with that. There are specific, Goetic spirits that can work with that. There are ones that work with horses. Like there's ones that work with, helping us with, divination of the present, past, and future, helping you find things that are lost or stolen. There's so many things. There are ones, the Goetic spirits that focus on philosophy and pyromancy and astronomy and logic and palmistry. We have those that help you work with critical thinking and reasoning. There are some that are specifically for specific animals like birds or dogs, and they can help you with that. There are so many things. I just really, really recommend when you have the time, take a look through the study guide and look through them all. It was never my intention to go through them all with you guys, just so you know, because there's 72 of them. So I really would love, just take the time, go through them. If there's any homework I'm gonna give for that, it's gonna be that. Okay, so when it comes to reviewing the ritual process, I'm going to make it kind of super, 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 super basic right now, because we're going to go through it super nitty gritty. I kind of view it as it's kind of offensive. It's kind of more of like offensive kind of magic, because sometimes it kind of looks at it kind of more of like the malevolent spirits, but you can also use it, and it also involves using angelic names as well, because you can seal them and you restrain them and you bring them underneath pretty much like your command, like it's a summoning and a binding. And if you choose to look at it that from that perspective, I use Goetic magic and I use this magic, but I don't use it in a way like I don't choose to look at it from that perspective as if like I'm sealing, restraining, commanding, and binding. It's more of like I'm sealing, restraining, commanding, and binding myself almost to their energy, if that makes sense. So, but I'm also gonna be teaching this from both perspectives. So before you're doing your ritual, you have to consider the time, because the moon phases matter. You have to consider the time of day. There are certain, It is said that like you have to do it on a specific day, specifically even days, typically. Because Solomon himself actually stated that when he attempted to do these outside of that, they weren't successful. Never worked. So there's even certain ranks can only be bound and can only be used during certain times. When you're looking at the Goetic list of kings, it's only from 9 a.m. to noon or from 3 a.m. till sunset. When you're looking at marquises, it's only from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. or from 9 p.m. till sunrise. Dukes, they're bound and you can use but between sunrise and noon, but only if the weather is clear. That's very specific. Knights can be bound any hour of the day. That's the only one that's really kind of all over the place. And then presidents can be bound anytime except during twilight at night. So just keep that in mind. Super brief overview, but that's how ritualistic it can be. Like that's how specific and ceremonial it can be. And it is. There are also King Solomon seals that you can work with. I'm going to go over those in a lot more detail. So I plopped a graphic in here for you to take a look at them to kind of start getting acquainted with it and to kind of let you know there's also this other, we have this other idea going on as well. I also have all of the sigils for the several demons and their sigils for summoning in here for you to take a peek at. So you can start taking a look at those as well in the study guide. Because again, this is just an overview, so I'm not going to go into any detail. I'm not going to go into any detail with that because we're going to get into super nitty gritty when we start practicing. And well, I guess not practicing, but going through the practice. And I'm going to do that in a lot of detail. I do have some information also in here about Aleister Crowley. To be honest, an entire series could be done on him alone. But because we're working with, Goetic Magick, and he's very influential with that, he's a big part of that. And we're going to be working with demons, he pops up. So as you're doing research and you're looking into it, I just wanted to have a little bit more than just his name. Because I feel like almost every pagan, every witch, they know his name. Even if you're not a pagan or a witch, you know Aleister Crowley's name. But most people don't actually really know who he is. So he was born October 12th in 1875, and he died December 1st, 1947. He was a British occultist, writer, and mountaineer. He was also an incredibly strong practitioner of magic, and he's the one that that has the spelling with the K at the end. He called himself the B666. He was renounced in his time, denounced in his time because he had an incredibly decadent lifestyle. He didn't have a lot of followers with him. He became more of like a cult figure. He was an occultist. He was a philosopher. He was a ceremonial musician. He was a poet, a painter. He spent a lot of times actually like up in the mountains, mountaineering. And it wrote quite a few books. Quite a few also while he was doing that. Mountaineering, based on, he was doing a lot of work with nature, and the reference of nature. He founded the religion of Bellarmine, which identifies himself as a prophet, entrusted with guiding humanity into the new era of Heros. He was a super prolific writer. He was super fascinated with the Egyptian culture as well. He was published over and over and again. At the end of the study guide, I put a couple more of his books down there. They actually don't even not all of them have to do with Goetic Magick or demons or anything or demonic entities at all. I just wanted to also give you guys other options to read by him because he's got a lot of topics. He's got a lot of topics he wrote about. So before we go into Christian demonology, do we have any questions on the overview with Goetic Magick? Okay, somebody put the okay. In the list you referenced legions. Can you define what that is? So legion is like a group of how do I explain that? Of lower demonic entities that specific demon, that specific Goetic spirit, that specific Goetic spirit would have underneath their control. I'm trying to remember, give me 1 second. I believe it's a specific number. Just 1 second. I'm gonna pull this up really fast. So it's typically, I want to say it has a specific number. Okay, I'm gonna have to double check this, Morgan. I feel like there's a specific number depending on the practice of what actually classifies what a specific number of demonic entities that are in a legion. But I believe it changes from culture to culture. It's usually just considered like a large group of lower demonic entities. I have to get going, but I'll definitely watch a rewatch. Thank you so much for being here, Jen. I hope are you still in here? No, she left. Damn it. Okay, well, if you see the replay, thank you. Okay. I've heard a rumor if you read his rights or his writing. Google says the Legion is 5,000. I could see that number. That makes sense. I'm gonna verify that though, Melissa, and I'm gonna bring it to next class. But thank you for looking that up and giving me a starting point. But I will I'm gonna verify that for you, Morgan and Melissa too. Okay, and then what did I see? I've heard a rumor if you read his rights or his writings, bad things happen. Yeah, it's a rumor. I just don't agree with it. I've read all this stuff. Nothing. I haven't had any like unintended consequences. I've read it all and I haven't had any. I own them all. Thank you. Where are the replays also? So the replays end up on YouTube. It may take, I think, what was the time frame Alex gave me last time? Like up to 6 weeks sometimes to get them up there because our academy director reviews every single class before it gets up because she wants to make sure we're not going to accidentally break any rules because YouTube has some pretty restrictive rules at times. It does. It goes up on our YouTube page and it looks like Honey's probably going to get you the link. And then Honey, I think you have a question. So if you're going to unmute yourself, you totally can. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat and I'll wait for you.
I am home. I can speak. Hello, people.
Oh yeah, your picture's back.
Okay. First, just real quick, I want to say, Melissa, you are very sweet. I don't even try. I just ask weird questions because I like to think my brain is weird and I like it like that. But that's very sweet of you to say about wanting to make her laugh like me. Anyway, I was gonna ask about the legions too. Off topic a little bit. Is the Christian God real?
Depends on who you talk to.
I'm talking to you.
Me? So, my personal belief. Okay. This is tricky for me. Okay, my personal belief is yes. But here's my many clarifiers on that. I believe every single deity exists. So do I believe the Christian God exists? Like the Christian God? Yes. Do I think that also their prophet Jesus Christ was a real individual that walked this earth? And yes, yes, I do. I wholeheartedly, like, yes, I do believe that. I do believe the Christian God exists. You can't have like this many followers and that not be a thing. Now, do I agree with what the Christian God says? Do I agree with how the Christian God is portrayed? Do I agree with what has been done in his name? No. Do I believe that how the Christian God is being portrayed and talked about now is the correct version? Absolutely not. I do not. I believe that it is very highly possible that the version of the Bible that everybody is reading from, which is only 2,000 years old, because if you go back to the Gnostic version, it's very different how they even reference God in the Gnostic version. God is a they and a them. It is a dualistic personality and energy. It is not in this masculine sense that we have in this Christian version God that we have now. So do I think it's highly possible that the version of the Christian God that is out there now is actually, what some would consider the evil entity that has taken and reversed it, and that's what those writings are based on, and it's actually a completely different deity that is being worshipped? Yes, I wholeheartedly think that is very possible. That might possibly be what's going on, but I do believe, yes, the Christian God does exist. I just disagree with his rhetoric. I disagree with the teachings, and I am still on the fence of what the true teachings of that specific God is. Does that answer your question? And I hope I didn't step on too many toes with that. I tried to not Try not to be offensive.
Yeah, that definitely answered it. And it actually made a lot of sense. I didn't know there's an agnostic version of the Bible before the Bible is out now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's older than like the 2,000-year-old Old Testament version.
Yep.
Oh, I'm still looking that up.
There's
I'm still looking it up.
yeah, there is. The story between Adam and Eve is completely different too. It's so different. Honey, I'm gonna send you some resources.
Oh, please do. Yes.
I will send you some resources on that because yes, it is very, very, very different.
Okay, that is fantastic. Thank you. But my best friend and I really like to debate on whether God exists or not that he exists, but about the Bible and if it's true and yada yada yada. I most of the time lose. I mean, in our theoretical debates, but
Well, I'll give you another tip too. If they're taking anything from the King's James version or newer, that's not that's it's all messed up.
okay. I don't know. We use the like teen friendly one.
That's probably
It's
yep.
easier to
So yeah,
understand.
that's not from the original at all. Anything from King's James and after is completely rewritten.
Okay.
There's even, if I remember correctly, I believe 16 Bibles, 16 books missing from it.
Dang. Okay. I
16
knew of a
complete books
couple.
that have been taken out.
Okay. Now the agnostic one, is that the Jewish Bible that has like
Nuh-uh, that's
16?
that's the
No,
Kabbalah.
that's a totally different one.
Yep, that's
Okay.
completely different.
Okay.
There's a lot of versions of this text out there. Oh, sorry, you're right. There's the Torah, and then we also have the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
We also have the Kabbalion. There's a lot that are based off that one. Thank you, Melissa, for correcting me.
Cool. Then two more questions. I think I seen Lindsay raise her hand. Can you change the phrasing or words that would to make it a little bit nicer when you're talking about binding or bound the demons when you're calling them in with the ceremonial magic, or does it have to be like word for word? As long as you have the same meaning, you have to change one word to a phrase to make it longer, but it's mean the same thing, but it won't be as harsh, so to speak. Can you do that?
There are different schools of thought on that. Some people will say no, and some people will say yes. I fall in the camp of yes, because intention matters.
Okay.
So it really depends.
Okay. That makes sense.
I know it's probably not the answer you want.
Oh, no, that makes sense. Wait, you said yes, that you can change it?
Yes, I believe that you can.
Okay. Then technically that's actually the answer I was hoping for, but it doesn't really matter what I was hoping for.
Okay.
Also, one last thing, on any of the pages that I've looked through, I haven't seen Lilith's seal or her name anywhere. And I know that she is considered and she's like a fallen angel, but she's also a demon, isn't she?
Yep,
And
I'm gonna do a whole separate thing on her, honey. Don't worry.
oh, okay, cool.
Don't worry. She's gonna be her whole thing. She's her whole own thing because she's technically, in some cases, actually in multiple cultures, considered the mother of them. So
Right.
trust me, I'm getting into that next class. I promise.
Yay. Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm done now. Sorry, folks.
Lindsay, do you still have a question? Or comment? I guess I shouldn't assume it was a question.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so again, just thank you. I love all this information. I was wondering if I could also get some of that information you were going to send, honey. I find that very interesting.
Yes, I can certainly do that.
And just as a note, like, even when it comes to New King James Version, a lot of Christians don't even know that very well. They just repeat what they hear in church or the rhetoric they hear. So even just pulling out what's actually in the Bible is very different than what a lot of Christians believe in practice.
I wholeheartedly agree with that too.
I have a lot of opinions. I won't go on a rant, but also just like, yeah, like even changing like from monotheistic with a sheer and stuff, whatever. But yeah, just I find it all very interesting.
Yes, I totally, we could have a whole conversation on this. Trust me, I promise. You have no idea how many times I get in debates with people and I literally stop and I'm like, okay, hold up. have you actually picked up and read this Bible front to back, or have you just gone to church your whole life?
Right. Yeah. Even when I was a Christian, a lot of Christians didn't like me because
Yep.
of the way I studied.
Same thing. Trust me. I promise you. I promise you. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but prior to my pagan path, I was a Christian missionary. So trust me, I get it.
And I appreciate your view too. Like, sorry, I won't go off on a bunch of tangents, but yes, I agree God exists, but he's just not who they say he is, or it should be.
Thank you. I super appreciate your feedback and being willing to share. I love it. Okay. Anything else anybody has to say or any questions before we jump into the next portion? Okay. So, Christian demonology. We have to talk about it because we have to talk about it. We can't ignore the fact that Christianity affects everything. As much as we want to, we can't. So demonology is a study of demons or the beliefs about demons. Within demonology, there's a couple different schools of thought about them. Some within the schools of thought of demonology believe that they may be human, they can be non-human, they may be separate souls, and they may also be disincarnated spirits that have never actually inhabited a body. So it really depends within demonology. There's a couple different schools of thought, and there's a couple differences within it. So since early Christianity, demonology has actually developed from a very, very simple acceptance of demons to a super complex study. It's actually very complicated. It pulls from Jewish demonology and Christian scriptures, and it's actually studied very, very in depth within the Roman Catholic Church. This is also a big reason why I'm talking about this too, because as I touched on it earlier, to sit here and say that they're not a thing is ridiculous. Roman Catholic Church, they have devoted a lot of time to demonology, the study of demonology. If I remember correctly, the documentation that they have for exorcism rites is 72 pages long on how to do it, how precisely to do it, how all of that goes down. It's like they're invested in this concept of demons. They're very invested in this. It is very part of that religion and culture, and to say it's not is, like I said before, it's ridiculous. So they built upon some of the references of daemon in the New Testament, because that term does pop up in the New Testament, especially in the book of Revelations. It's talked about in there a lot. And the Christian writers are talking about the fact that there are demons, and they're going to be coming in with the apocalypse, and a part of the apocalypse, and they have the potential to bring about absolute, terror and destruction. But there are a lot of different schools of thought on this. We have, Celius, who actually agreed that they are all evil. There's absolutely nothing good can be about them. They're all evil entities. There's absolutely nothing about them that can be good. And then we actually had Origen, which was one of the theologians within the Roman Catholic Church, who talked about the fact that most of them are evil demons, and they can be, removed. Or they are fallen angels, and they can be talked about. But he also believed that some of them could be nature spirits or giants. So he played along with that belief a little bit. So that's also why I wanted to talk about this, because he's the one that brought in the fact that these could be all pagan deities, because he was talking about nature spirits, he was talking about giants, he was talking about all these other entities, and they very much are part of pagan culture. They're very much a part of about pagan beliefs and systems. And so it was talking about how the fact that these creatures were literally just roaming the earth, and pagans were there. We were allowing them to roam the earth. We were allowing them to take over the earth. And so that's why there was an abundance of them. And that's why this study was needed. So this is a big reason why it came about. This is a big reason why it became a thing. And they believed that because of this, that there was actually no functional difference between spirits of the underworld and spirits that were on the earth. So they could actually, banish them and remove them and get them out of the material world and be able to get them back into the underworld. So that's why this philosophy of demonology, that's why this philosophy that you could, summon them, you could use them. That's why it became a thing. Anthony the Great became a part of this as well, where he described demons as actually a psychological power that was there to tempt us into evil. He was really, really kind of crucial to this. And he talked about demons were actually our internal struggle with our inclinations and our temptations. And so this is where, you know, the concept of demons and Christian theology, this is where we kind of had this kind of pull into and be a part of it. Because he started to describe it as evil and demons being actually a deficiency. It was your deficiency away from God. It was the way that you were being turned away from God. You were void of the actual true divine divinity, and you aren't a part of your real existence. So that's a big reason. That's another philosophy that came out of this and part of the Christian demonology. We have Michael Psellos, who then actually ended up proposing that there's an existence of several types of demons. This comes into the concept of demonology with their different ranks. And they're deeply influenced by the actual material nature of the regions within which they dwell. Because remember, within this demonology philosophy, they're talking about the fact that they believe that, you know, they're on the earthly plane. Like they're on the earthly plane. We have the ability to put them in other planes and other dimensions, but they're on the earthly plane. So they believe that it's part of the material nature of which they reside in, and that I apologize, hold on. And that the higher realm, the higher natural realm that they inhabited, the more powerful the demon was, the more powerful they had to be able to actually do harm or cause mischief or possess, be able to do possession, cause illusions of the mind, or what they would be calling it mental illness at that time, or be able to, you know, cause harm or anything to humans, diseases or fatal accidents or anything like that. So that was typically left for that higher class of demons. And then typically the lower classes were ones that, you know, they weren't able to speak. They could do kind of more annoying things. They are a little bit more animalistic in their behavior. They may give out like false divination and like false oracles. They may act more as like false oracles to try to steer you in in the not right direction. I hate the verbiage I have to use during this. It drives me insane. But that would be kind of more what they were doing. So when it comes to the highest demons who inhabited the ether, which is actually beyond the moon, so these were considered the highest ones, they were the Leloria. We have the Aira, which are the demons of the air below the moon. We have Synthia, which is inhabiting the land. Hyera and Inelia, which is dwelling in the water. Bipactonia, which is to live beneath the earth. And misophiles, which is the lowest type of demon. Those are the ones that literally tend to be like super, super, super senseless. Now, when it comes to the practice of demonology, they use the invocation of saints, holy men, and women, and holy water sometimes, and water, in order to be able to bind, summon, exorcise. There's a couple different tracks you can go on with this. And how you can use, you know, Christian demonology when it comes to this. But for the most part, like they're not trying to work like demonology and Christian demonology. They're not trying to work with them. That's at least that's publicly what they say and how they teach that. And I'm gonna leave it at that. So when it comes to the contemporary Roman Catholic Church, they teach that angels and demons are real beings. That are also symbolic devices. So it's very interesting when you listen to them because they teach that they're real and they exist, but they also teach that they're symbolic devices. So that's also kind of why how they're able to keep people very confused and on the fence and like, oh no, they can't be real because they say that. But well, they also say that they're real. Because the Catholic Church, they have an incredibly large amount of priests and officials that are sanctioned exorcists. They perform many exorcisms each year. I was literally just doing some research earlier today and watching a new documentary on this. There is one Catholic priest who recently retired in 2022, who he's claiming that he was actually like the head of the Roman Catholic Church, like exorcism department. He was head of that. He was like their top-notch go-to guy. He claims he performed 180,000 of these in his life. So like they're very, very steeped in this. It's a formal rite of exorcism. They claim that it can only be performed by bishops and those that are designated to do this. They use symbols, they use prayers of deliverance, they use a lot of different things. At various times in the Christian history, there's been a lot of different attempts to be able to classify demons, and it's changed, but the one that I talked about before is typically the most commonly accepted one and the one that's still used now. So when it comes to the summary of like Christian demonology and really what it is, it's really just a science of demons and their actions, and what they do. And because of Christian theology, and they consider them evil, they're really not trying to work with them. They're really trying to work with them when they're trying to do this. They're really doing this as a way to be able to rid them, to banish them, to bind them, to do what I would view like harmful acts with them. But again, this ends up becoming a pretty touchy subject, because do I think that possessions are a thing? Yes. Do I think they happen the way they're portrayed? No. And that's a whole other thing. Okay, so let's see here. Okay. I know that's a really, really brief overview of Christian demonology. I'm sure you guys probably have some questions. Just if you would like to, you can ask them and I'll let you know if I am going to cover them when I do a more detailed on this. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for being here, Melissa. I'm sorry you had to leave. Okay, you already left though. Okay, anybody have any questions? Honey, go ahead.
Not really a question, just comment kinda with how exorcisms are portrayed now. I don't know in written, but I know like within movies and that's to me a lot like the Hollywood thing to try and make it seem cooler, kind of like voodoo dolls. They're actually healing, not hurting things. So I just want to point out the comparison between,
Yeah.
it's bad Hollywood.
Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Anybody else have any comments or questions at all? Okay. Okay. So a couple other topics I wanted to touch on just super, super briefly, because we're going to be talking about working with demons, and when you're doing research, you might come across them because A, misconceptions, and B, the beauty of being pagan is you can fall underneath a lot of different paths and you can work with a lot of different things. So I wanted to touch on what theistic Satanism is, because we're going to be working with demons, and there's going to be, devils brought, people are going to throw that at you, and people are going to talk about devil worship and Satanism and things like that. I actually just want to like talk about this and reiterate, like it's actually not a core belief to work with demons when it comes to theistic Satanism. Can you? Yes. Are there absolutely overlaps? Yes, but it's not like a super core thing. So theistic Satanism, otherwise referred to as religious Satanism, spiritual Satanism, or traditional Satanism, is actually an umbrella term for religious groups that consider Satan the devil to objectively exist as a deity. So they believe that Satan's a deity. And again, I don't like the Satan and devil being interchangeably used, but they are. Shouldn't be, but they are. So they consider him a deity, a supernatural entity, and a spiritual being that's worthy of worship and reverence. So they can convene with him. Some of them view him as an archetype, some of them view him as a metaphor. He can also be found in Leviathan Satanism, which is the whole other thing. Organizations who uphold the theistic Satanistic beliefs often have, it's a very like mostly affiliated. Like they have few adherents. They can have a lot of independent groups, so independent cabals. They're very, very self-marginalized and a very marginalized group. They work with a lot of various types of magic, and that's why I want to talk about this too, because there's a stereotype. There's Satans and demons and like all this stuff when it comes to theistic Satanism, and it's just, yes, can that be a thing? Yes. Can they work with demonic entities? Absolutely. But any pagan can. Like literally any pagan can. So that's why I wanted to talk about this too. So most theistic Satanist groups exist outside of Abrahamic religions. That's a pretty big common thing as well. And again, like I said, you can work with it, you cannot. I have a little bit more information in here too if you want to read a little bit more. But again, I'm going to go into a lot more detail of this because both Alex and I are going to be doing classes on the different paths that you can choose. I also wanted to touch briefly on Luciferianism because, again, Satanism and Luciferianism are different things. And because we're going to be working with demons and talking about working with demons, they're going to be topics you're going to come across because of misconception and also because there can be overlap. Luciferianism is actually a belief system that venerates that the essential characteristic that affixed to Lucifer, which is he's the light bringer. The tradition usually refers to Lucifer not as like a destroyer or a guardian. He actually can he's actually a liberator. He's a light bringer. He's a guiding spirit to darkness. They typically view him as like the one true God, usually. It's very common. He can be referred to in interpretations as the morning star. He comes across a lot of different cultures in Greeks and Egyptians. Also, he can be tied to the Greek titan Prometheus. He's also can be tied to Lilith, which I talked about in my class on Lilith. The basic principles for Luciferianism is the highlight of truth, of freedom of will, and worshiping your inner self and your ultimate potential. So that is really, really what it's about. It's meant to shed dogma. It's meant to shed the basis of morality. It's meant to really, really, really look at that and to break free from that. I also wanted to talk then about the fact that the belief in good demons, it started to show up. It's not just a modern thing. So in good, I mean the term benevolent, which I've used throughout class today. And it coexisted along the same exact time as most of this Christian indoctrination was happening. So that's also why I wanted to talk about this. This isn't quite just new, like it's coexisted during the same time. The church, of course, absolutely opposed it. But in September 19th in 1378, he actually they condemned everyone. Like the church was going out and publicly condemning anybody who thought kindness across demons. And because it was flourishing, it was actually absolutely flourishing during that time within Neoplatonism, within a lot of esoteric views and a lot of the mystery teachings. And they were really, really strengthening the spirits and strengthening this whole philosophy that every single being and entity, we all have the ability to be both benevolent and malevolent. And to sit here and claim that demonic entities are simply only malevolent is just ridiculous. Agrippa of Nettesheim argued that almost and very, very publicly, that many demons can be super kind or even just indifferent towards humans. There are many that are literally many demonic entities that can simply just be indifferent towards you. There is also Giordano Bruno, who believed that in order to actually truly achieve higher knowledge, to truly achieve enlightenment, awakening, those are all different things, but some people use them interchangeably. But to whatever your goal is, to complete your sacred purpose, your sacred contract, all of that, you needed the cooperation of these benevolent demons. Like you needed an order, like you needed to learn from them. You needed to know about them and you needed to be willing to work with them. You needed to have that knowledge in order to actually fully become your highest version of yourself. So those are two people that literally during the exact same time that this very, very, very negative connotation and indoctrination was happening, they were speaking out very publicly about this. This isn't a new thing. This isn't a new age thing coming in from neo-paganism. This isn't like, people are just trying to like make bad things, evil bad things look good now because I keep getting that thrown at me that I'm just, we're just trying to make that happen, or you're just trying to push back against society and that's why you're doing this. Like, no, I'm just trying to be anti-Christianity. This has been a thing. Like this has been a thing throughout history, and I really, really wanted to touch on that. I do have 2 books in here. I highlighted them at the bottom. Great books on demonic magic, great books on things. I'm pretty sure this one is Some Rituals with Working with the 72 Demons. If anybody doesn't have access to the Goetia, I believe I should be able to get that onto the website. I'm just gonna make sure it actually links correctly after this, but I should be able to get that on the website and then you can have access to that because I do have a PDF file of that, but I should be able to put on there. Otherwise, if you go to academia.edu, I believe they offer it for free right now. I believe Sacred Text also has the Goetia on there as well for you to get access to if you need access to that way. I'm trying to think. I think so. Okay. This is the end of the study guide. This is everything that I wanted to go over today. Like I said, this is very, very basic overview. This is also like I really wanted to talk about culturally, historically, all the different references to them, what can be considered a demon. I really wanted to work on changing the frame of mind and connotation on that word and what demonic entities are. So any questions, comments, opinions, arguments you want to have with me, now is your time. I really see nothing. That either means I did a really good job or I didn't. Go ahead, honey.
Question then a comment. Question. With Lucifer,
Yes.
since some say he is a god, will you be covering him in the divine masculine classes or in the demonology classes or both like you did Lilith? But I didn't know about with like Lilith because we didn't have the demonology class going back then. So
So it was my plan to talk about him with the divine masculine, but he's probably also going to get talked about in the Pantheon series a lot too.
okay, awesome.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And comment was, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
You're
I
so
loved it.
You're so welcome. I'm so glad. Okay, anything anybody else has? Okay, I don't know if I have the next class for this series on the schedule already. If not, I will get it on there and give you a detail of like what exactly we're gonna go over the next class. But I am super, super excited for this series, and I'm really glad that you guys are here and you're being willing and open and yeah, willing and open to learn from me. So I don't know what else I have to say. I guess I had more and it just left me. But again, thank you so much for being here with me, you guys. Tomorrow I have my class on Santa, by the way. Teaching the whole history of Santa throughout history and cultures. And yeah, if you didn't know, Santa's Odin. So if you want to learn how that is, you can find out that out tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. Have a good rest of your day.